I'm willing to bet that if contraception was no longer part of the picture, most of the cultural interest in BDSM would go away. Most of the choking, most of the role-playing, most of the other ways that people look to put the danger and the intensity in to a sexual encounter, which has been sort of neutralized. We need to give sex back the seriousness that it has. Mm-hmm. And this for me means the feminist case against the pill. Now I'm to be clear, I'm not making the argument for taking legal measures against the contraceptive pill, because that's just nowhere near the Overton window. But
you'd like to.
Those are your words, Francis, not mine. What I do think we can do at this point is just lean a little bit harder into something which is already happening, which is a female, particularly young Gen Z female, backlash against the pill. And that's a phenomenon which I've been tracking for some years. I was genuinely shocked to hear how how usage and prescription of these really quite mind-altering medicines has changed since I was in adolescence. I mean, when I was a teenager, if you went to your GP and said, "Can you put me on the pill?" you'd get the third degree about, how are you in a steady relationship, and X, Y, and Z, and is it an appropriate relationship, and do we need to talk to your parents, and so on. And now, as far as I can make out, it's pretty routine, for GPs just to stick a girl on the pill at about the age of 15, and that's just it. And there's a book that came out last year, I think. Is it called Your Brain on the Pill or something? Anyway, it goes into just how radically mind-altering the effects are of this drug. It changes who you find attractive. It changes your entire hormonal cycle. It changes your attitude. It can have major mental health implications for young women whose brains, let's not forget, are still developing. The downstream, the mental, the psychoactive impacts of this drug are immense. I mean, I was on it briefly, and I stopped in my early 20s because I just realized it was making me fat and sexless and low-key insane. And I was just, it's just not worth it. What's the point of taking this thing so I can have sex if I no longer enjoy having sex? What am I doing? Now, I think I'd rather just not have sex with men, which is the solution, which I adopted for a number of years. Yeah. So now we're seeing a growing body of young women who are just saying, I don't want this, and who are embracing, less invasive, less psychoactive, non-hormonal contraception or just cycle tracking. And my argument is that this is just where we have to start here. Don't take the pill. Don't encourage your friends to take the pill. Reject this idea that you can't be a person unless you make sort of radically psychoactive cyborg interventions in your own body. And there are a number of things that follow from that in terms of how you relate to men and to your own sexuality. And one of them is that, of necessity, you become choosier about who you sleep with, which from women's point of view, when you think about hookup culture, is obviously beneficial, because one of the things that women complain about is ending up basically consenting to loveless or degrading sex because there's no obvious reason to say no. And if you sort of neutered yourself sexually by taking this medicine, there sort of is no reason to say no, and sometimes it might just seem politer to put out, which is a pretty kind of grim position to be in if you're a woman. And I think privately, a lot of what flew under the Me Too banner was basically this. There's young women who assented to things sort of out of politeness, or found themselves railroaded into sexual encounters, more or less out of politeness, that they couldn't say no to, or didn't have a robust enough reason to say no to, because they were already contracepted. And if you're in a situation where there's a meaningful risk of pregnancy, that's a pretty solid motivation for saying, no, actually, I'm not coming home with you, or no, I'm here, and we're not doing this. And it's also, for all but the most, straight out toe rag, it's a fairly robust reason as a guy to not go there as well. If you're like, I'm not on birth control and I'm not going to use birth control. It would take a fairly serious scumbag. Anyway, so it reduces the opportunity for bad sex, which I think is obviously in women's interests. It also makes sex better. If you're as speaking as a woman, I'm not going to give you grisly details, and I'm too old and ugly to be talking about this stuff anyway. But if you're in tune with your own cycles, it's just nicer. You know where you are, and there are certain kind of moods go up and down over the course of the month in ways which are interrupted if you're on the pill. But I think one of the and taking that a little bit further, it's my view that you can't have the intensity and the mystery and the beauty of a sexual encounter without the danger. Fundamentally, we take sex seriously, or have historically taken sex seriously, because there's the potential of creating another human. And once you take that out of the picture, something strange happens to the entire field of sexuality. And again, I can't prove this because it's just a hunch, but I'm willing to bet that if contraception was no longer part of the picture, most of the cultural interest in BDSM would go away. Most of the choking, most of the role-playing, most of the other ways that people look to put the danger and the intensity in to a sexual encounter, which has been sort of neutralized. It's kind of vegan bacon equivalent of the sexual encounter. It's almost the same, but not quite. And so you have to add more hot sauce. And that's where you get all of these, escalating levels of degrading, disgusting kind of kink and extremities. People are trying to add the hot sauce back into something which is fundamentally vegan bacon. And the obvious solution, if you're starting to get inured to the hot sauce, is have the bacon, but that means you put the danger back in. And I call this. I don't think of this as a purity-based argument against contraception. I think of it more as rewilding sex. And when you in an ecological context, when you talk about rewilding, that means sometimes introducing apex predators back into an environment. I don't know if you've seen that amazing viral video about what happened when they introduced wolves back into Yellowstone, and it had all of these incredibly complex effects on the ecosystem, which ended up with a river changing course, because the deer followed different patterns, and then other things happened in a different pattern, and eventually, things righted themselves in a whole ecosystem which had been going slightly wrong before, and it couldn't have happened without the apex predator back in. So I've used that as an analogy for thinking about how we can correct some of the things which have gone wrong in our sexual ecology by reintroducing the danger and the intensity. This is a risky argument to be making. I feel like I'm on genuinely heretical territory here. But essentially, I'm making the pro-sex case against contraception.